Wallace and Toby Wallace from Alpine Helicopters. Today is one of the hardest days I've ever had in my career. To see the skill, the knowledge about New Zealand nature lost in that helicopter goes to the heart of who I am and who I'm leading of Department of Conservation. The Wallace family, we are linked at the hip. Lady Prue had set up the National Parks Conservation Foundation, raising money for Doc. The Wallaces have been such a part of what we're doing in controlling pests and bringing back our biodiversity. The programs they run on Madagascar Beach and Minaret Station of their own accord that they never talk about because they believe in what we're doing. And Nick, his innovation, his engineering skills to try new things, to work with farmers, to kill rabbits with a helicopter, to do goats, he was just incredible. Paul Honderlink, I've known since 1980 from working at Madagascar Beach, from working at 1080 gels and how we bring back our biodiversity, how we scale up animal control where we need to. He invented the Judas goat, first in the world, with the Wallaces, where you could reduce the whole cost of tar and goat programs by having a radio telemetry that would guide the helicopter to where the goats were in numbers. So between the Wallaces and Paul, we were able to do big catchments out here to stop the spread of animals south, to deal with goats, to deal with pigs, to deal with our biodiversity. And yesterday they were heading into the Landsborough, probably one of our most successful Area 1080 operations, where we've brought birds back, we've brought mohua back, we've brought kaka back, and we were trying to protect some of those precious alpine ecosystems. And it just wasn't to be. 47 years of conservation knowledge. Scott was the pioneer of predator dogs, the first in the world. And 1996, he worked out how we could use dogs. Everywhere Scott went, the Kiwi numbers went up. And as soon as Scott left, the Kiwi numbers went down. Incredible thought about, he was born to kill pests. He was born to bring back our birds. And there was thousands of birds, be they kokako, be they hihi, teiki, on our islands because of Scott's pioneering with predator dogs and in conservation dogs. He was so good, the Japanese government had him in Japan dealing with mongooses. So in that helicopter is resources that we will never ever replace. You just cannot get 40 and 47 years of experience and Nick's experience in engineering with a helicopter to work on nature and really bring back nature for New Zealand as the heart of who we are, of what we were doing with the Wallaces, with Scott and Paul yesterday.
My heartfelt sympathies are with the families of Scott, with Paul and Nick, the Wallaces. New Zealanders care about conservation. Scott, Paul and Nick were each pioneers in their field. Scott with the predator dogs, Paul with doing landscape scale aerial control of wild animals like chamois, like tar, working alongside Nick and the Wallace family to do that and to actually restore our mountain lands to health. So conservation is a partnership. The loss of the huge professional expertise and skills of these three men is a loss for conservation in Aotearoa as well as for their families and workmates.
Jonathan, did you want to speak?
Well, I on behalf of the Wallace family and the Alpine Group, obviously we're grieving for our own family member, for Nick. We're also grieving for Paul and Scott. As has been alluded to, it's a very long-standing partnership. Alpine has been working with initially the Forest Service some 55 years ago, and more recently the Department of Conservation. And it is a team environment. You are working collectively together to achieve a desired outcome. The notion of a contractor relationship is not exact. It is very much a team environment, and because of that, it makes it particularly hard. Paul and Scott are not dock workers. They are senior rangers who form part of an elite task force team that work throughout the South Island and have done for some time. This is not a new operation. These are day-to-day operations that have been carried out for a very long time. Our thoughts are with all the families at this terrible, terrible time. Thank you.
Jonathan, can you tell us a little bit about Nick as a person?
Nick was larger than life. In a literal context, he was 6'6". He was 120 kilograms. But he was effervescent. He was nothing was a problem, and he was passionate about what he did. He was one of 4 brothers from an aviation family, an aviation background. He genuinely loved what he did, and it doesn't make that any easier that he died doing what he loved at all. But he was good at what he did.
How hard is this for the family, obviously, so close after that?
Well, that's a cruel reality, is that it is not quite 3 months since Matthew's death in a helicopter accident not far from here. And that makes it, of course it makes it hard. It makes it doubly hard. You don't become immune to this. No one does. And so that's difficult. We're a very close family, as are Toby and I, and it makes it very hard. Yeah.
Has the community been offering any support following your brother's death?
Absolutely. I mean, we're very fortunate in Wanaka. We're fortunate in the South Island. We're fortunate in New Zealand that we really do support each other. And Wanaka is still a rural heartland, and it has insurmountable amount of support, and we're tremendously grateful for that. Yeah.
We're dealing with a Twizel tragedy and a Wanaka tragedy, and Paul had just shifted 8 weeks ago to Twizel to run this ramp up in tar control that we are trying to do. He knew more about it than anybody. He'd done more of it than anybody, and it's just such a tragedy. And our thoughts just go to the Wallaces, to the Theobalds, to the Honderlinks, for what's happened.
You were able to visit with the Minister this morning, family in Twizel?
Absolutely, and we'll continue those visits with the Wallaces.
And the staff at the Twizel office too. Obviously, we work closely with both of them.
Will there be any events to mark their lives or their deaths?
We are going to put the full weight of Doc behind Scott and Paul, and we know the Wallaces have already offered help, and so many people are offering us help, and they'll be uniquely recognising who they are, and I've just told the staff, let's drop everything next week and get in and make this special. These are special people.
Do you move in personally?
Yeah, I've spent days in tents with Paul drying out socks over fires and swatting sandflies. And we were staying with Nick a few weeks ago. It's incomprehensible what's happened, and this is my worst day as a chief executive.
But very grateful for all of the support. I mean, Kiwis really care about conservation. They recognise the professionalism, the skill and the expertise the dedication and the commitment of these three men to protecting the things that Kiwis love.
Jonathan, can I ask when either you or Toby last spoke to Nick? Do you remember what the last set of conversation
Well, we talk a lot as brothers, and so that morning I'd gone out flying early and had spoken to Nick before I'd gone. Toby was the same. It could have been any of us in that helicopter, and yeah, that's not lost.
Any thoughts on the possible cause?
Not at this stage. It's not a. It's human nature to speculate, to want to know what happened, and that's a perfectly natural phenomenon. But we're very fortunate in New Zealand that we have the Transport Accident Investigation Commission as well as the Civil Aviation Authority, and it's their role, coupled with the New Zealand Police, to establish what happened.
What's the next step for your family in, I guess, the grieving process?
Well, I don't know, actually. The grieving process is you take it as it comes. At this stage, the focus is on getting Nick back to his family, to his wife Carrie and his children Genevieve and Katrina, and also Paul and Scott back to their families. And that process will take a little bit of time. Yeah, we're not... we know that it's going to take a little bit of time.
This is obviously your family's life. You play choppers all the time. Does this make you second guess on it? Is it just second nature? This is just, you can't help this thing?
No, it doesn't.
Not really. I mean, Jonathan and I spoke about it. It's in our blood. It's in our family. We've been in aviation for since 1960, early 60s. We're not going to stop flying. If someone has an accident on the road, you don't park all the cars up. So we'll keep going, but it will be tough. And Nick was a great little brother.
Yeah. I think that the important thing to understand is that aviation is not dangerous, but it does carry inherent risk. And like any risks, you have to mitigate and ensure that you calculate those risks. What they were doing as part of their wild animal control operations is not that for cowboys. It is a very calculated, experienced operations that happens on a day-to-day basis. It's important to understand that. For us, aviation is a way of life, and unfortunately, it can be very unforgiving.
One more question, maybe? Wind it up.
So Paul was our most experienced person at shooting from helicopters. He was frustrated by the recent controversy. He's been doing this for 30 years, and he just wanted to get out and do the work that he'd been doing to control the spread of these animals and bring them down to something that we can manage with the recreational hunters. So, he was very excited, and he had no second doubts about hopping in a helicopter.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I thought you were very well behaved.
Did a very good job. Thank you.
May I take a photo as well?
Yeah, no problem. Are you going to
At least Nick's not here because he didn't make it.